years of Overwatch, the player dynamics were based depending on the layout of the map that the match took place in, as well as the willingness of players to act as a hero depending on skill or abilities needed for team composition, while players discovered which teams' comparisons worked best. Depending on the said stage being played there were never any real complaints as to characters chosen during a said match. Each character in the game had abilities that could help their team or harm the opposing team, but as more characters were introduced into the game and the abilities that the heroes could use increased the variables that could occur during a match due to the circumstances, it naturally became harder to predict, and as a result certain characters would be chosen more often than others due to effectiveness while playing or abilities to influence the tide of match for either one team or another. Prior to Brigitte being introduced in terms of competitive play, the layout remained somewhat standard as the same characters would be picked for each team regardless of skill or map. What's interesting is that while players didn't complain about these matches that they were doing against one another, it was during the initial stages of the Overwatch League that viewers were becoming bored watching these literal mirror matches with one character against the exact same other character on the opposing team. And at this time the league was just starting out and didn't want to lose revenue or, more importantly, attention from gamers or critics. The hatred for Brigitte wasn't immediate. At first, the dynamics of the character were welcome to change the stalemate that most professional high-tier games, as well as a good amount of higher-ranked competitive games, had become. But when the character was introduced, her features soon made her able to take on or handle multiple heroes at the same time due to Blizzard's original intentions for the character. Before her release, McCree was the only character in the game that could stun players. Before her release, Reinhardt was the only character that had a movable shield. Before her release, only damage characters could move as fast as her throughout a map. Brigitte had features of all other related heroes within her, and soon this universal standard of abilities became too much for most players. More than any other since her introduction into the game, players have called for the character to be removed. The hashtag #DeleteBrig is a legitimate tag with relation to the Overwatch game, and Brigitte users are often the most despised out of any player playing particular characters, their main characters of the game. Multiple players of Overwatch have called Brigitte, quote, the forbidden character, end quote. And it was actually a sort of unspoken rule among players to rarely, if at all, pick the character for any sort of game mode. There have been legitimate examples in competitive matches where either team refused to play as Brigitte, even if it meant losing the match or winning the match. The character has been decisive, and throughout the entire lifespan of the game, that would never change. A character can be overrated but hated because the character that can have the best intentions, but those said intentions can be implemented and reacted to than what was envisioned.